Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of Becoming Unbound, the podcast that's all about breaking free from the boxes we've been put in, unlearning the stories we've been told, and creating our own definitions of freedom. Whether that's in your job, your relationships, your mindset, or all of the above, you are so in the right place. All right, friends, and today I'm super excited to introduce to you our guest, Sandra Cooze, a certified trauma healer, intuitive mentor, and coach. She's also a Reiki master and teacher and a published author. After healing from her own deeply painful experiences, Sandra created a powerful healing method that allows others to fully release trauma, triggers, and PTSD with ease. Her book, Journey to Yourself: How to Heal from Trauma, is a deeply transformative guide that supports readers on uncovering who they are. All right, friends, take a deep breath, open your heart, and let's dive in. All right, Sandra, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Carly. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. So I was wondering, would you be able to share a little bit more about your background, the work that you do, and maybe even the process of how you wrote the book that you did?
Sure. Well, as you already mentioned in my little bio, I'm a trauma survivor. And since my therapist dismissed me after our first session with the words, I believe you already worked through it all. What am I supposed to do? I had to find my own way of healing. And I did. And I learned so much about trauma and what really is keeping us hostage in the story and what needs to be done to really fully heal from all angles. And I just found my passion and purpose.
Wow. That's incredible. And we talk about it a lot on the podcast, how oftentimes our biggest, worst traumas, those big T traumas, can often lead us to those places that really allow us to become unbound, see everything for what it is, and then have this is the hope that you end up resolving a lot of those triggers and understanding that to unbind yourself from those old patterns, those habits, those little things that, like, from trauma can keep you very small for a very long, long time. So can you talk to us a little bit about what that means to, like, experience trauma, be living in those patterns, and then where does one even start to, like, begin to recognize those patterns and then work through them?
That's not an easy to answer question, but that's okay. I will try. Most of the time we realize that we don't feel the way we want to feel, but we don't draw the connection necessarily that this is trauma related because we've been usually raised by our parents, grandparents, great grandparents, and so on that, well, this happened to you, suck it up. That's life. Sorry, I'm not a person to swear normally, but that's usually what this is. And so it's hard to recognize that it actually can be healed.
Right.
So it's more like being brave, being there for yourself. Because when we're usually dealing with trauma, we're trying to navigate life as good as we can. The ups and downs, being happy somewhat, and trying not to get down the rabbit hole. And we're really existing rather than living. We're focusing all our passion on other people. We become people pleasers because we're afraid that something like this could happen again and we don't want anyone else to get hurt. So we're rather being the people pleaser because their happiness makes us feel good without us having to go too deep within ourselves where all the trauma is sitting. So we
Right.
keep life and relationships and family superficial because going anywhere below the surface is dangerous.
Yeah, and those things, like, when you see, yes. So I can imagine that, yeah, if you're kept in that dangerous place where instead of looking at what's going on the inside, you're constantly externalizing, helping, soothing other people, when the whole reason behind that, I guess, is because, yeah, it seems dangerous because either you'll A, be put in that situation again, or B, you'll actually just have to understand and have awareness of your trauma. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like we would be in this
Yes.
dangerous place?
Yes. And the other danger is that we don't know what it feels like to be without the trauma. We don't know what the whole healing journey is and being without it. And this not knowing how to live without the trauma, what life would be like without it, is usually what stops most people to even start trying. It's the fear of the unknown, because it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, it's staying in that comfortable little box that
Yes.
is so familiar. It is hell, but the unknown of stepping out of that box and you don't know, yeah, you don't know who you are without your traumas,
Mhm.
without your experiences, without the people that you've, you know, oh gosh, like who are you as a person without the things that you've gone through? And we sometimes don't even know that those are the things that are holding us back, right? Because
Exactly.
you have no idea.
Yep.
Wow.
Exactly.
So I guess there would have been multiple moments in your life, but was there a specific moment, Sandra, where you understood like that moment where you're like, okay, I can't go forward. I can't stay in this familiar hell. Where did you start? Like what was that light bulb moment when you realized you couldn't keep living being that same person and something had to change?
Mhm. Well, I had to think long and hard about this question because I couldn't find anything that was profound enough, but I think I got something.
Okay.
So I was raised from parents who have been through deep trauma. My father was raised by a narcissist, and my mother was raised by an exhausted mother who was constantly abused by her mother-in-law. So, which means they came from trauma and they raised us through that trauma. They tried to do much better. So we weren't beaten or anything. They gave us as much love as they could. But it was this silent treatment. So when my sister and I did something that they didn't approve of, silent treatment sometimes for 2 weeks. That was the best they could do. And they thought, this is how you're doing it. But for us, it meant love was taken from us. So we felt like we did something wrong. And so they don't love us anymore until they decide to do again. That's the silent treatment part. And so I learned how to stay silent. I learned how not to speak up, not to voice my opinion because that can get you banned from love. And the first time I really noticed that was when I had my first interview. When I was in my 30s, my first interview, and I was heart pounding. I didn't know what to say. I felt so terrified thinking about I'm going to be on radio and there's going to be millions of people listening to me. I mean, this huge image I had, and it was horrible. I had my crystals in both hands to calm me down. I was walking around the house the whole time. And in the end, after the interview, I realized how it was really just a conversation between two people. But that made me really think about why I was doing this. And I was thinking back through my life about when I was afraid of speaking up. It was with relationships. I was afraid to voice my wishes, what I would like to do. I always went ahead with what everybody else wanted to do because I was afraid to say, no, I would like to do this. The same with my parents. I never really spoke up and voiced an opinion. I mean, now I do, but back then I never used to. And I didn't want to be that person anymore because inside something was brewing that wanted to be heard, that wanted to speak up loud and clear and bring messages across. And you know that all too well, being on podcasts, you have to be able to feel comfortable speaking into the void, looking into the light, the little dot on your camera. You just have to. If not, it's not going to work.
Wow.
So I think that was the most profound moment that where I really started to think, okay, this is not who I want to be.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine that when you first start to understand and reconcile with what it feels like to put your voice out there, like what a moment to have like your first radio interview and then all of a sudden to be like, I don't know, before or after that time, but like understanding that your voice has been silenced for so long. And you think that you're talking, you're conversing, you're with friends, you're at a job, you're saying yes, sir, no, sir. You're like, you feel like you're communicating. But I totally resonate. And I think our listeners resonate with like that fire inside of you that's like, I have been silent for so long, and not about the things that superficially like are everyday kind of things. It's like what's actually going on inside, and what a phenomenal kind of experience. Now, I have a question. When you heard back the interview, or were you able to hear it back? Like what did you think about that? Because I remember my first podcast and talking into a mic, and it was that exact feeling of like, oh my gosh, I'm about to put my voice out into the world. Am I nuts? Hey friends, quick little interruption. You have something to say, something real, something that could change lives, but instead, you're stuck Googling how to edit, how to post, and how to make your podcast actually go somewhere. You're overwhelmed, second guessing every step, and wondering if it's even worth it. That's where I come in. I help entrepreneurs and creatives launch and manage powerful podcasts that actually grow their audience and build their business. No more guessing, no more burnout. Just you showing up to speak while I handle the rest. I manage top ranked shows around the world. Editing done, strategy covered, social content handled. You record the magic and I take it from there. So if you're ready to finally make your podcast work for you and share your story with the people who need it most, go to carlybutlermedia.com and book a call. You don't have to figure this out alone. Now back to the episode.
Yes, I did hear it back, and I had friends listen to it, and they said, "You were great. You were so calm. You were so relaxed." And I was like, "No, I wasn't." They were like, "Well, it sounded like it." So it's interesting how other people perceive it when you're in inner turmoil, like you just want to run away and hide somewhere. And others say, "Well, you're great." It was the same when I started my YouTube channel. I mean, you can see my transformation, from horrible hair to being not feeling comfortable in front of the camera until now. So just by that, you can see how much you grow when you really challenge yourself.
Amazing. So, what would you say? Like, what's that trauma behind not being able to share your voice? That's kind of a big question, but like, what would that look like if our listeners are like, I feel that way, but like, where do I start to look in my past? Or like, when that voice, that block, that feeling of actually listening to that fire comes from, like, where can you start to look at in your life? Like, where does that come from? What learned behavior is that?
Well, it can come from many different places. The first thing that I would say is to ask yourself is, what are you afraid of? It's when something is blocking you, it's always, what are you afraid of? And then look at it. It could be fear of rejection. It could be fear of ridicule, fear of judgment, fear of failure. And then once you understand the fear that you have, then you say, okay, why? Where is this coming from? So then you basically tap into that feeling of fear, understand how this feels for you, and then you follow this feeling to the stories your mind shows you. It's like home self trigger release, basically. So you follow
Okay.
the feeling, you determine the fear, and then you follow the feeling to understand where this is coming from. And once you understand that, you're already halfway there to healing it.
All right. So feel that fear and like try to reconcile it with it. I think so many people feel this fear and they're like, yep, I'm scared of this thing. But there's so much information within that feeling. And then you hold your own hand and like walk
Mhm.
yourself back through the fear. And it will hopefully give you information as to like, maybe you felt this before, a story that you're telling yourself. And what a valuable tool, so that like I feel like anyone doing this, like if you're afraid of heights, if you're afraid of speaking, if you're afraid of, oh gosh, there's so many things that you could be fearful of, and then to walk back, like fear, like you said, fear of rejection, fear of looking silly, or what people are going to think of you and then reject you, or like all of those things. So what a great first step, just to sort of walk yourself into that fear and then understand where it comes from.
Now, the interesting thing about those fears is that it's always essentially at its root cause the fear of what other people may think. For example, fear of failure. That's a very interesting one. Think about that little kid that is like the toddler who's running around and he's having fun and he's falling down, stands up, looks, mom and dad around? Nope, let's keep running. So, and then if kid falls, mom and dad are there? Yep, let's start crying. It's the same thing with fear of failure because we're only afraid of failure when other people see and think that we may have failed. So once we stop caring about what other people think, that fear of failure is just obsolete. It just vanishes. Poof, gone. So then the question is, why are we afraid? Why do we have fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of ridicule? It's always about what other people think. So maybe you have been lectured as a child too much. Like whenever you try to do something and they're saying, well, why do you even try? You're going to fail anyways. Or didn't I tell you not to do this? Or this, I told you so. You know, that from our childhood, when our parents thought they would teach us how not to do things without realizing we want to experience that for ourselves and then not be ridiculed for it. Like, I told you you shouldn't have, things like that. So it's mostly about what other people think about us. And once we stop caring about us, once we feel enough, that fear goes away and we just don't care if we fail because it's only one way it doesn't work.
That is so true. So yeah, and I've heard this sense that like if you the fear of failure only comes from people who are watching you, right? Like cuz if no one could see you fail, then it would all be fine. And I think it's so much worse in today's day and age because it we have this social media. We put our lives on the internet. So let's say you do leave a job and start a business, or you can always kind of tell when someone leaves a relationship, and then I don't know, maybe you failed at leaving the relationship and you're back with that person, or whatever it is that you're making a leap to do. And now you have the world watching you and your friends and old friends from high school and family and all that stuff. It makes that failure magnified, right? Like it's not just like you failed and your little circle of people that you called on your landline would know that you failed. It's like the whole world now has access to your failures. And so it makes these big leaps and these, doing something that is scary, it makes it so much more amplified because we have such a big like reach on the internet now. It's wild. Have you found that people's fears through the trauma work that you do are amplified with social media and the presence online?
Yes, I have. But it's really interesting. Once you own everything you do and everything you say, you're no longer afraid because you own it. I always tell my clients, own it. I mean, the work that I do is not easy. It's super worth it, but it's not easy. But when I'm with clients and I do coaching or my trauma modality or anything where I talk with them, I own every word I speak, which means if I should, God forbid, ever make a mistake, I would own that. So, and once you own your decisions, you stand behind them and you don't worry about what other people will think about your decisions, then they're your decisions. Then you don't make the decisions for or because of someone else. And then it doesn't matter what other people think. It's just like with trauma. Once you own your story, it stops pestering you. Same thing. You're free once you own your story, once you say, yep, this happened to me. Exactly. I own it. This happened. Because until you do, your trauma is in the realm of nightmares because you don't want it to be true. But once you own it, it loses its power over you. And it's the same with people's opinion. Own it. Own your decisions. Own everything you say. You're good.
Oh, I love that so much. Yeah, like the owning of something, it also brings up the idea of like there's not what not responsibility, because sometimes there are situations in life where you are truly a victim. Like there's no, it's kind of like black and white. Like you are a victim to whether it be, I don't know, like there's so many things in life. Like there are some people out there that do things to other human beings, whether it's intentional or not, to hurt them. Like you are a victim in that situation. So I think there's a great differentiation between like like owning what happened to you and just knowing that like, yes, it did happen. Yes, in that moment, I was a victim of that circumstance. And whether you were a young child or a teen or whatever it is, and then understanding that if you own it, as in like you can, and I'm just trying to like put words to what you said is and understand it myself, that if you own that it happened, then all of a sudden you can put words to it, you can put language to it, you can put feelings to it, you can have awareness of it, versus just saying like, oh, I don't know what happened, or it wasn't a big deal, or let's just not talk about it, let's not like try to understand what was happening in that. Hold yourself, hold your child self or your teenage self or your adult self, and like be okay with the fact that it not be okay with the fact that it happened, but just be like, it happened, end of story. Let's move into the work of what it looks like to now deal with the impact that that had on our lives, right?
Right.
So, Sandra, we talked a little bit before about the type of work that you do and how it's differentiated between other types of therapies and experiences and healing. Can you tell us a bit about that? Because that was fascinating. And I want our listeners to know about what you do.
Okay. And feel free to jump in with questions at any time. Don't let me
Okay.
babble away. Well, how it started was I became a Reiki master and I started to practice Reiki and had clients. And the interesting thing was after each session, we were sitting down and they were talking to me. They just opened up to me and they talked about their trauma and their experience with their therapists and counselors. And I heard so many stories of where they, with their story, triggered their therapist. And then they had to help their therapist through a trigger in their own session. And I was like, well, how can you deal with your trauma when your therapist can't? She was like, I don't know, but it's just me. I stopped going to my therapist. I'm afraid to go someone else. Or others were saying that just like me, they were just dismissed. Like, oh, come on, it can't be this bad. Things like that. So I learned pretty quickly that a lot of, yeah, the mental health system is not trauma informed. Like my psychologist that I have, he had no idea that just because I wasn't sobbing while I was telling my story, that I wasn't still dealing with it. I was just suppressing. So, and I was like, something has to change. There has to be a way to really help people heal. A month later, Rise Above Your Story was born. So, and then I became a certified coach. First, I thought I would go into social work or counseling, but I don't like rules and I don't like follow the rule, but I like to do my own thing because it seems to work better. So I went into coaching and I came across a modality called traumatic incident reduction, or short TIR, which was created around the same time as EMDR, but EMDR got all the funding and TIR got nothing. So it's the most amazing modality no one has ever heard of. But it's really incredible how it helps people move through their trauma so quickly. 5 to 6 sessions, you release one traumatic event, including PTSD. It was specifically designed for that. It's gentle, it's quick, and it's evidence-based. So these are the two main things that I use, coaching and TIR. And as I was progressing with my clients, I came across one who couldn't handle questions. Questions in themselves, no matter what question triggered her. So I had to find a different way of helping her because I'm not one to give up on people. So I realized that she was doing so well with just releasing energy through Reiki. So as we were doing coaching, talk therapy, whenever a trigger came up, I pulled out the energy, released it, and she was getting back to balance and normal so quickly. So, and that's how I started incorporating energy work into what I'm doing. And it's truly amazing how quickly people can heal when we just focus on more than one thing. Because when you think about therapy, it only focuses on the mental emotional aspect of the trigger. But every time a trigger comes up, there's so much energy coming up with it. That's like, we can't breathe. We can't talk. It's like there's like this pressure, and this is just energy, especially when it comes to PTSD or a panic attack. You focus on releasing that energy and you have them back in balance in 5 minutes. When normally it can take days before they come out of one of those panic attacks.
Wow.
So yes, my work is very out there. It's different than anything else, but it works. And I can tell you to see that aha moment in my clients' eyes, that sparkle that returns when they have released the most intense trauma they dealt with for years. It's so humbling to see that. It's so rewarding because they really take their life back and they can feel it.
That's incredible. I love that you've combined the two sort of modalities of like bringing in that energy work, because I've had such amazing experiences with energy work. And don't get me wrong, at one point in my life, I was like, what even is this? And now understanding and integrating that, like I have my energy worker who I go to and like I swear by, just because the work that she can do is profound, because there is this energy that builds up in the body, whether it's stuck in your hips or it's a hot burning sensation or there's tightness in your muscles or your shoulders. Like these things, we could look at them and say like, oh yes, that your shoulders out of whack because you picked up a thing. But sometimes these reoccurring things and these pains in our body are actually pinpointed centers of stuck energy, right? And so it's really interesting to me to be like, oh, I've got this lower back pain, lower back pain, lower back pain. It's like, now that I've got this awareness of that, like it could be not just that you're like twisting or playing tennis or doing something incorrect with your body, but there could be a buildup of energy that is keeping your physical body stuck. And until you deal with that, it's going to keep coming up. So I love that you've woven those two modalities together, and I'm sure you can see that, and I'm sure your clients are so grateful that they get to experience that with you. And I also love that what you've talked about is that, sorry, can you say the acronym again?
Traumatic incident reduction. It's called
Traumatic
TIR.
TIR. Okay. So in that, I feel like it's great to see that you have results. Like, I think talk therapy, you could go to a therapist for 3 years and talk about how you're stuck and don't know what to do, and you're in these bad patterns and you're mentally distraught, and there's no end goal. Like, is
Yep.
anyone like, is there a therapist in the world that's like, my goal is to not see you in a year?
I say that. I always tell my clients, I want to spend as little time with you as possible because you got a life to lead.
I love
So,
that. Yeah, because talking about all of this stuff and all the patterns that we have and the bound up energy forever and ever and ever, like it can have you stuck in just talking about it. And until you actually do something to release it, like you're never going to experience that liberation and that freedom that,
yes.
like you said, that life to live, right?
hmm
So
Exactly.
in the podcast, we talk about freedom. This is all about becoming unbound from all sorts of different types of things that keep us stuck. So for you and your work specifically, I want to know, like, what does freedom look like for either what you experienced or what your clients experience? How does that come about after they've experienced a session or sessions with you? What does freedom look like after you've dealt with and healed those traumas?
Well, it's different from client to client, of course.
Yeah.
But if it's easy, let's say easy trauma, but they have already done most of the work, and it's like we're working more on the limiting beliefs and the self-sabotage, because this is also coming from trauma. It's just the next stage after trauma healing where you get the little messy bits out. And it's like being able to set healthy boundaries. Stop, like realizing you're people pleasing and then learning how to stop doing that successfully, and how they're growing, how they're saying no here and no there, and how it starts to feel good after the first terrifying moment when they're like, uh-oh, I said no. What am I going to do now? Are they going to hate me? But realizing that it's not the case. Yes, other people don't like it when you set boundaries, but that's the point. So learning to do that, standing up for yourself and really starting to focus on yourself. The most thing that especially women have issues with is self-love. If you love yourself unconditionally, no one can really traumatize you anymore because you're so self-confident. You walk into a room and people look after you because you have this natural confidence that comes with healing from everything that's keeping you stuck. So it's beautiful to see how they're changing, how they become more courageous, more outspoken. They even go to their coworkers and tell them like what they think of them. Or you have like the sexual harassment in the workplace. Normally you stay quiet and laugh it off. And now they're going, well, how dare you? How dare you talk to me like that? They have the confidence, they find their voice. And this is what happens when you release trauma. You get your voice back. You get your compassion back. Your fear is leaving because there's nothing to be afraid of. I mean, of course, airplanes and all of that, but within yourself, there's nothing to be afraid of. And this is what they reach. And the smiles when they say, you know what, I think I'm finished. When they know that they are finished, it makes me so happy. Of course, it makes me sad to see them leave, but yes, it makes me happy that they're ready to reclaim their lives.
I love that sense of freedom because, yeah, when you have the confidence and you become this sort of unbothered person by other people's opinions, by fears, you're just like, I'm unbothered. There's no
Mhm.
cage. There's nothing holding me to anybody else's opinions, things. It's just all me on my own. I can literally do whatever I want. And you talk about someone walking into a room. I can just get that sense that it's magnetic because it's also safe. Like someone could go to another person who has that type of confidence and be like, you don't really care what I think or what I do. Like I'm interested to know who you are. There's this like magnetic pull towards these people who have this confidence who you're like, wow, you don't give a shit. Like I want to be friends with you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the great thing is it's natural. It's not this fake it till you make it. It's coming from within. It's totally natural. It's just who you are becoming. And there's nothing arrogant about it, because it could sound a little arrogant, but no, it's not. You have the confidence around you, but it's loving. It's inviting. It's nurturing. It's like a sparkle in your eyes, and people resonate with that positive energy that you're radiating out because there's no negativity. I was on another podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I had to fill out a form before. One question was, what do you love and what do you hate? And I was like, well, I can list you 100 things that I love, but I don't hate anything, because whatever I don't like is not part of my life. I just don't allow it to be part of my life. So only the things that I like are in my life. And that's healing. And that's why trauma healing is so worth it, because that's on the other side of trauma. Once you heal, that's when you get there. It's like that mountain you climb when you start to heal. You're on top, and then you notice you're changing. You notice the difference. It's a profound difference. And then you walk down on the other side and you leave more and more of your baggage behind until there's nothing left but your true authentic self.
That's beautiful. Wow. There's so much that I want to pull out of this that like, yeah, when you start to become a totally different person, like it's like I can imagine that like you feel like you've done a huge amount of healing. They've left a session with you and then you go out into the world and the amount of freedom that you would feel after, let's say, yeah, you have that first encounter where the old version of you would have stayed silent, stayed quiet, not said what was on their mind. And then you open your mouth and you say what's on your mind. I feel like the 5 minutes after that conversation would just be the most blissful experience to be like, I can't believe I just said that. Like, I just totally unbound myself from what that person might have thought of me. And all of a sudden, you've like, doing more and more of that, all of a sudden you're like, I can't believe that I'm able to say exactly how I'm feeling in that moment. And not just from like in a harsh way where you're defensive and you're trying to set these boundaries that are like all the boundaries are placed on other people. And it's like, no, this is how I feel. And I'm saying this because I care about myself. And I'm no longer people pleasing or understanding that, I need to make sure that everybody likes me and all these things. It's like, if I said something and you're bothered, that's a you problem. That's not something there's nothing I can do to fix that. You're triggered, you're bothered, and no, I'm sorry, not sorry. Like we're not all of a sudden not apologizing for those things and those and your voice that's coming out of you that defends who you are, the love that you have for yourself, and saying no to those people and patterns. Like I love saying no to things. It's really fantastic and it feels like if that's so freeing.
The funny thing is, though, usually my clients don't even realize how much they have changed because whatever was holding them back is no longer there. And they start to voice their opinion or tell somebody to be quiet or just, they don't realize that. They just tell me about, this and this and this happened. And I was like, are you kidding me? Do you know what just happened? Like 3 months ago, you weren't able to bring a word out and now you told this person off. Are you kidding me? Look at how far you've come. Because they change without noticing they're changing. Because whatever was holding them back has been released. And now this is the new normal. So it's not something they grow into because whoever you want to be is already within you. It's just buried. And the more you heal your trauma, the more this comes up. So the natural you is coming up and it's like, this is your new normal. So you don't notice any change because this is like it technically has always been if it hadn't been for the trauma. So sometimes, yeah, I have to point it out and say, look how far you've come. Look what you just did to get them to realizing that, which is always like a funny conversation.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, if someone is feeling like they have trauma that they either need to work on or they just have this inkling that they are stuck in patterning in old sort of understandings of who they are and they want to start doing something about it, what would you suggest that they do?
Well, I would suggest reaching out to me, of course.
Yeah.
But no, but healing trauma, there's like two types of people. There's the people who say, yes, I have trauma and I should do something about it. And they usually go to therapy and don't get very far because they're not going deep. Because in order to really heal trauma, you have to bring it to the surface so it can leave. It came in, so it has to come out. So then you have those people who are saying, I'm fed up with it. I want it gone. This is it. It's in my way. When you're at that point, you're ready. And then you will do whatever it takes. The question is, where are you? Do you feel like, yeah, I should do something about it? I don't like who I am, but nah, I don't know. So we go to therapy and hope the therapist's going to fix us. There's nothing to fix. There's only to release. So the question is, how ready are you to dig in and do the work and kick the trauma out? Because suppressing trauma is just as hard as releasing it. But when you release the trauma, when you release the trigger, it never comes back. Whereas when you suppress your trauma, it keeps on coming back whenever you start to be a little happier because you cannot feel the good without the bad. So as soon as you start to feel super happy, cracks open, trauma's coming back to the surface full force. And then good luck trying to suppress it again. So which one is it?
Yeah, it's
You
like
want to
how
act like you're doing something or you want to actually do something?
yeah, like how sick are you of being in your own way?
Yes.
Yeah. I can
And then once you,
imagine.
sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's it. And then once you are ready, you will find the right person for you. Because trauma healing, there's no one size fits all. Therapy works for some, not for others. Others need coaching, or people even release trauma with yoga. So there's so many different things you can do to release your trauma. Just got to figure out what's the right thing for you. So I may be resonating with a lot of people, but not everybody. And that's how it should be because everybody needs something very specific for them. So figure out what that is that you feel drawn to, and you'll find the person who can help you.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. I think it's also, it highlights, yeah, like some people need breath work, some people need yoga, some people need to like have a really physical release of whatever it is. And I think it's so important to sort of start to do a little bit of your own research because, yeah, like therapy, if you've never done it before, it could be the answer for you. If there's a
Mm-hmm.
therapist or a practitioner that feels comfortable to you and you feel safe, like not knocking talk therapy, like I'm sure it does work for some people, but sometimes breath work and like really getting physical with the body and releasing through somatics is amazing. So I love that you are open to helping people to understand that it's not just one thing that's going to help unbind them from this life that they've been living. It's going to be a multitude of things, and you may have to try a couple different things at first before you truly find the thing that clicks, that you're like, okay, now this is the modality that's going to help me release or let go of or like really understand and start to actually heal and become a little bit more unstuck. I love that. So, Sandra, you wrote a book. Can you tell us, what was the inspiration behind getting that book out into the world?
Well, funny story. I started writing a book calling Journey to Yourself, where I wanted to talk about the spiritual journey of becoming who you are meant to be. And I started to write, and the more chapters I wrote, the more trauma came through the chapters. So the book basically told me what it wanted to be in a way. And the more I wrote, the more the ideas came, like from healing trauma over limiting beliefs and then going over to becoming your true authentic self. And I was like, well, that's going to be a 1,000-page book when I'm done. So Journey to Yourself is a trilogy going to be. Journey to Yourself, How to Heal from Trauma, written by someone who did, is the first book in a series, and it has been published a couple of years ago. And it's about first my story, just like a little bit. And the rest is really understanding trauma in an easier written way, no big words. I mean, there are enough books out there with that. It's with exercises, room for notes. Then I have a journaling technique in there. I've guided meditation. So I'm really trying to unravel the whole concept of trauma and what we are going through in the different phases so that I take the fear out of it because we're only afraid of what we don't understand. So, and if you can understand what trauma really is, and no, it is not the story. The story is what will never change. The trauma is not the story. So I'm explaining what trauma really is, the different nuances, and make people think outside the box. And then I have a few friends who have their own modalities that read a chapter about what they do and how that helps with trauma to give people an idea what is out there. I have one EFT, I have one recreational therapy, I have one yoga. guess it. And I wrote about crystals and Reiki and coaching. So there's many different modalities my friends and I introduce to give people a start where to look. And I'm just hoping that with my book and the series, once it's done, that people can start their own journey and start healing and find their way.
I love that. It's so important. We need so much more authenticity and people not being afraid of all of the things that we talked about in the beginning of the podcast of, just fear of rejection, fear of failure, all these types of things. Like, and I think I'm really pumped. Like, I feel like we are in the most beautiful time right now where we are all as a collective understanding our traumas, going into this deep work and really becoming the most, I don't know, the most emotionally intelligent type of humans that have ever existed. I think it's such a beautiful time that we are meeting and seeing coaches and yoga teachers. Like, one time someone told me that, there's too many yoga teachers out there, and I was feeling down on myself because that's what I was doing, and I was like, no, I think there's a reason that we are all here, because collectively there's a lot of trauma going on. And what a beautiful time is it that we are in, that we have the tools around us to start to deal with some of this generational trauma that has been with the human species for a very long time. So I'm so happy that you are one of those people here to guide the human species along and to really understand this. So Sandra, is there any last thoughts or words that you want to leave with our listeners?
Like I always put at the end of my YouTube videos, trauma is not a life sentence. You have the power to heal.
Thank you.
Yep, exactly.
All right, Sandra. So if people want to find out more about what you do, where can they find you?
Well, people can find me on my YouTube channel, Sandra Cooze Unfiltered. They can find me on Facebook under Rise Above Your Story. And through my website, riseaboveyourstory.com. There's a button on top for a free consultation. So if you want to contact me, chat with me, understand more of what I'm doing, and if you resonate with it, I would love to talk. And yeah, I guess, yeah, that's about it.
Okay, I will put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm so happy we got to sit down and talk about this, and hopefully it inspired somebody, even one person, to go out and start to say, like, all right, I'm sick of this. I need to get out of my own way. It's time to start dealing with what's going on behind the scenes and take that power back. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wow, what an honor to sit down with Sandra and hear her story and understand more about what it actually means to heal that trauma and what we can do about it. Her journey is a reminder that nothing is impossible, and our past can be the powerful light when we choose to face it with courage and compassion. So, if today's episode made you feel seen or anything or inspired a fire within you, please take a second to like, subscribe, review, or share it with a friend who just really needs to hear it. That's how we grow and keep these conversations going. Thanks again for listening. Stay tuned for our next episode of Becoming Unbound.